Well, good morning, NorthPoint. My name's Jeremy. I'm one of the pastors here, and I got to tell you, I just love baptisms. I mean, is there anything that's more like Easter Resurrection Sunday than what's happening in baptism as Ruby goes into this water and proclaims the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ applies to her. Through faith in Jesus, his death is my death, and his life now I receive as well. Romans 6 verse 4 says that we were buried with Christ by baptism into death, that just as Christ was raised from the dead, we too now get to live a new life in Jesus Christ. And that's what God has for you here this morning. I don't know how you came in here, and I don't know the mood that you're in when you come in. If you're like happy and joyful and celebrating, and you got Easter baskets this morning, and you're jacked up on sugar, I don't know, and then life is good. Or if you're sad when you come in, I don't know if your mom maybe drug you into this place this morning and she's like, and we're getting a family photo before we leave, so you just deal with it. I don't know. Take the photo. It's for your mom, okay? Take the photo, do the thing. But however you came in here, God has something for you. He wants you to be here this morning, and he wants to speak to you today. And that word that God has for us, we're going to look at from the book of Romans. So if you got a Bible, or if you don't have one and you're new to this, there's some Bibles there in the chairs in front of you. It's on page 913, Romans chapter 3. This is the study that we've been doing together as a church, walking through this letter in the Bible, in the part of the Bible called the New Testament. We believe that this is God's word to us, so that the most important thing that we're going to do today is to try to hear from God, to hear what he has for us. Now, the word that we've been getting from the book of Romans has not been an easy word, and it's not been a super fun word. This is kind of like a, hey, sit down, I need to talk to you about something. And it's going to be really difficult to say this. And that's what we've been going through. And some of you that are part of NorthPoint, you've been coming back week after week to hear more of the sit down. This is going to be really hard talk. And today we're going to kind of come to the culmination of that, because what we've seen is that regardless of whether or not things are hard to hear, the more important question is it true though? Because if it's true, even if it's hard, we need to hear it. And that's what we've been getting here from Paul. Here's the recap. Paul has basically said this: God, who created this world and knows what life is all about, the one who gives meaning and purpose to life, he created this world, and he is perfectly righteous. He's perfectly holy. He is just in every way, but human beings rebel against him, and they are unrighteous. So there is a gulf here that is fixed. There is a separation between God, the righteous one, and the people that he has created who are unrighteous and turn away from him. Now, Paul's also shown us that there are different ways of being unrighteous. And not everybody is unrighteous in exactly the same way. Might just be like similar to how there are different types of bad drivers in the state of Iowa. Did you know there's multiple ways of being a bad driver in Iowa? One of the classic Iowan ways of being a bad driver is that on 3-lane interstates and highways, you would camp out in the far left lane while car after car is passing you on the right-hand side. Anybody want to confess and get right with God this morning for that one, right? So there's that one. There's also maybe some of you that fancied yourself growing up that you were going to be a NASCAR driver, right? And you never quite made it on the circuit, but you cruise around in your Toyota Camry and you act like you are Jeff Gordon in that car. So that could be you. One of my favorite ones is people that they don't drive over the speed limit, but they gun it till they get up to the speed limit and then abruptly go 25 miles an hour, right? Just to feel the force. There's also maybe some of you that think that roundabout lanes are just suggestions, and the shortest way between 2 points is a straight line. And so you just, every once in a while we see it, right? The tire tracks right through the middle of one of our famed roundabouts here in the Johnston area. There's multiple ways of being a bad driver, and Paul tells us there's multiple ways of being unrighteous before God. He lays out two broad categories of this, though. And the first category he has of being unrighteous would be these blatantly immoral folks. People who are just like, God, I don't care about you. I suppress your truth. I don't care what you have to say to me. I'm going to do life my own way. Now, people could do that very actively, like really be against God and hate God. Or people could do it passively where they're like, I just don't have time for you, God. I'm just going to do what I want to do with my life. That's one way of being unrighteous. But there's another way of being unrighteous that could be a little bit surprising, and that is this group of people that are confidently moral. and happy about their morals and their church going and doing the religious duties and performing the religious rituals, and maybe even having a sense of, I'm kind of better than other people who don't go to church, who don't do these things, who don't practice the things that I practice. And so they take confidence in the performance of rituals or duties or things that they think are earning the favor of God. But the giveaway often for this second category, a way of being unrighteous, is kind of a smugness and a looking down on other people and a kind of sense of moral superiority that I'm better than other people because I'm doing the right things. I think the right things. I believe the right things. I have the right affiliations in my life. And so it's a sort of self-righteousness. And what Paul has shown us is that, look, all people, it doesn't matter what category you fit into, all people in light of God's glory and his righteousness are unrighteous. We are all sinners. And I think that you know this. Because we are human, we are sinners. And if you doubt that you are a sinner, we could just ask your mom, or we could ask your spouse, or we could ask your roommate, and they would share some stories with us. So here's what I would love for you to do. I would love for you to turn to your neighbor right now and say, I love you, but you are messed up. I'm just kidding. You don't actually have to do that. I wouldn't make you do that. You know me. I wouldn't make you. You guys are like, no, I'm doing this, man. I am doing this. You gave me permission. I've wanted to do this for a long time. So some of you are still doing it. You're like going on and on. There was like one statement, but you can stop. You can stop now. Goodness. There are a lot of ways to be unrighteous before God. Everyone is, which means, secondly, we're all in trouble. Paul talks in Romans about God's wrath. Because God's righteous, we're unrighteous. God has wrath, or judgment is coming against unrighteousness. Now, when we talk about God's wrath, we can't think about God's wrath or anger the way we think about human anger. When you and I get angry, we say things like, I'm sorry, I lost my temper. I lost control of my emotions. And so we kick things, we yell at things, we punch things. God is not losing anything ever. So God doesn't lose his temper. He's not flying off the handle. He's not in that way getting angry like we get angry. What God's wrath or judgment means is God's determined opposition against sin and evil. God is not going to allow sin and evil to continue in this good world that he has created forever and ever without taking care of it. And so God's wrath is his determined opposition to anything that hurts his creation and hurts the people that he has created. And because he is righteous, he can't allow unrighteousness forever. He will determinately cleanse the world of all of that. And look, we wouldn't want eternity, the eternal state, to be any other way, right? We'll talk a little bit later about how we can get there, how we can get to heaven. But if we're actually going to end up getting there, you wouldn't want it to be a place that has any unrighteousness in it, right? Or it wouldn't be good. And God will take care of that in his wrath. The issue that you and I are facing, though, is this. How do we get out of the judgment of God and get his righteousness so we can have a relationship with him, so we can be with him? How do you get God's righteousness? You could try to earn it. You could try to perform or do enough good things, going to church, trying to be a good person, give to charities, smile more at people, try to kind of make yourself righteous. But how long does that last you? And even if you, in your life, you make some progress towards that, you know that you can't be perfectly good like God is, right? I have a friend that's around my age, and I remember him talking about how when he was young and he was in elementary school, he was a pretty ornery kid. And so he would maybe be at school and he'd be getting in trouble at school. And he says, one time I came home and I was in trouble with my parents. My parents sat me down and they're confronting me about this. His name happened to be Christian, which is great for this story. So like, Christian, what is going on? You can't do this. And in his frustration, he said to his parents, look, I can be good at school or I can be good at home. I can't do both. It's too much, right? Has anything more human ever been uttered before, right? Don't you feel that way? I can do this, but I can't do that. I can do this most of the time, but I fail in this area. I can't get this thing under control. I'm not the person I need to be here, but a lot of times I am, and it's just human nature. It's asking too much for us to be good and do good all the time. No one can do that. We all are unrighteous with no way to earn righteousness. The starkness of it, we could just frame it like this. There can be no unrighteousness in heaven. Human beings are unrighteous. Therefore, heaven has no room for humans. That's the starkness of it. And even right now, living our lives on this earth, if we are separated from the God who created us and we can't really know him and have a relationship with him, that means we are distanced. We are separated from the purpose and meaning of life. All those big questions you have can never fully be answered, and we can't truly find happiness or fulfillment apart from the God who created us. That's the problem. Now, if you get to that place, and you have a sense of kind of a sinking, dark, desperate, kind of discouraged feeling, I think that's what it's intended to do. But it's intended to do that only so that you and I will come to the end of ourselves. We can get to the end of our striving, our working, our performing, our trying to earn, and at the end of ourselves, God comes in. Romans chapter 3, verse 21. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known to us. Righteousness that comes from God. It's been revealed. It has been shown to us, and it's apart from the law. I mean, all this truth that God gave, the first half of the Bible and the Old Testament, was the law, it was guidelines, it was directives. Yeah, it showed the character of God, but also showed us that we can't be like God, that we will fail. But this, now a righteousness apart from that law, has come to us from God, to which the law and the prophets testify. So even the law and the prophets, which showed us that we're not good enough, they also gave a promise that something greater would come that would be the answer. What is that answer? Verse 22. This righteousness is given to us through faith in Christ Jesus. It's for everyone who believes. There is no difference between Jews and Gentiles. In other words, there's no difference between churchgoers and non-churchgoers. Moral people and immoral people. People that think they're doing all the right things before God and people that don't care a lick of what God thinks. We're all equal in this way, it goes on. We are all sinners, and every single human being falls short of the glory of the standard of God's perfection. But if we can accept that, if we can accept the desperateness, the equality of that situation, that as humans we are all equal, no matter what category of moral or immoral we fall into, we also can receive this in verse 24. Every single one can also be justified. Everyone can be made righteous freely by God's grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. God presented Jesus as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood. This is to be received by faith. God did this to demonstrate his righteousness, because in his forbearance, he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. Do you know what that means? It means God is patient with us, that he forbears with us. You know how when you run a red light or you don't follow traffic laws, do you get struck down by lightning immediately when you do that, right? You've lied to somebody, you've deceived somebody, you've said something nasty about somebody before. Does God send lightning from heaven to obliterate you and you got to pay for that sin right away? No, that's not typically how it happens. Now, every once in a while, something like that does happen. Well, this thing that happens sometimes in our house, most of you know I have 5 daughters and we have a wonderful family and it's amazing and it's great. I love being a girl dad, but sometimes, there's arguments that happen occasionally, right? And so sometimes even maybe a young one is I'm gonna come, hit my sister and punish her for what she just did. And on her way to go hit her sister, she bumps her elbow on the coffee table, right? And then before she can get her sister, she gets, you know what we call that in my house? This is not PC, but this is what we call that a Jesus spanking, right? Because Jesus just took care of that right before you could do the thing you were going to do, because he's sovereign, knows what's going on, and kind of put you in your place. So that happens sometimes, but most of the times when we mess up, God's not pay now, right? That doesn't happen. God is patient. Why is God patient with us and he doesn't give us what we deserve immediately? Paul tells us. Verse 26, God did this to demonstrate how righteous he truly is at the present time, so that God would be shown to be just, to be righteous, and at the same time, the one who justifies those who have faith in Jesus. That God would be just by not looking the other way at sin and the payment that needed to be paid, but that he would provide righteousness. He would provide justification. That means to be made right. He would provide that for us. So here we go. Into the desperate situation we find ourselves, in spite of our sinfulness, in spite of our half-hearted efforts to try to be good, but always coming up short, God provides his righteousness for us, which is the only way that we can get righteousness. if he will give it to us as a gift. And that is precisely what he has done for us through Jesus Christ. So the biggest problem that you and I have in our lives, the biggest thing you and I will ever come up against, God decided to resolve for you. And you just have to receive it through faith. This is the encouragement and the invitation that every single one of us has today as we come into this place to celebrate Easter. Maybe being drugged by your mom, maybe coming on your own accord, I don't know. But here's the invitation for you. Receive God's righteousness by faith. Receive the very righteousness of God. Did you know that this is what happens when you trust in Jesus as your Savior? We have different ways that we think about this, but if you think about, well, I trusted in Jesus or I believed in Jesus, we used to say things like, I asked Jesus into my heart. What is actually happening when that takes place? Do you know what's happening in God's mind? He is giving you the righteousness of Jesus Christ so that you can have a relationship with him. Wow, I can't get it on my own. I can't earn it. My credentials don't really matter that much. I can't figure it out on my own, but I can receive it simply by faith? Yes. And in fact, that's the only way that you can get it, is to receive it by faith. But it does require that you would come to the end of yourself. Because it's not an earning, it's not an achieving, it's not a performing thing, it's a receiving thing. And the baptism here with Ruby that took place that you got to experience today is an incredible picture of that, right? Because Ruby, she comes down into the water and we basically ask her a question. Ruby, who are you trusting in for your salvation? Who are you trusting in to have a relationship with God? And Ruby, you said, what did you say? Who are you trusting in? Jesus. She said it again, Jesus. And then what does Ruby do? She's just in the water, right? And then she is trusting that her mom is going to put her down in the water, and then what else is going to happen? Her mom's going to bring her back up out of the water, right? That she wasn't bad last night or whatever, need to be kept under a little longer, right? The mom's going to bring you back up. She is just in her mother's hands for that baptism. Perfect picture of what your relationship with God has to look like. Faith. Trust in Jesus Christ that you are going to raise me back up to life, apart from anything I do. Did you notice that the most repeated truth in this passage is this? Walk through it with me again. Verse number 22. Righteousness is given through faith. And Paul's like, in case you're getting it, to all who believe. Verse number 25. It is to be received by faith. And then one more time, Paul's like, I really want to make sure that you get this. God justifies those who have credentials, skills, a really good job, Fortnite ability, right? Lululemon leggings, Stanleys for every single day of the week. No, God justifies those who have one thing, faith in Jesus Christ. It's the best news ever, because you know what it means? It means you don't have to have Lululemon leggings or Stanleys or an Xbox or a job or a family or be married or have anything else. You need one thing, faith in Jesus Christ. Faith alone. But you have to come to the end of yourself to receive it. Because even this faith, notice, is not really about your faith. What I mean is this, I could subtly make the mistake of focusing on my faith instead of focusing on the object of my faith. And I could make it about like how consistent my faith is and how strong my faith is, and I could subtly turn faith into a work. I could turn faith into a performance thing. But let me ask you this, what gives you the righteousness of God? How do you receive that? What saves you? It's not actually your faith. Jesus saves you. Jesus gives you the righteousness of God. Faith is simply me saying, God, I'm abandoning myself to you. I've come to the end of myself and I trust you, which is really helpful because how strong is your faith? How consistent is your faith? How good do you feel about your faith? Do you ever have any doubts? Ever have any fears? Ever have any questions for God? Are you ever like, God, I don't know what you were doing in this situation. Guess I'm not saved anymore. If it's about my faith, it's not about your faith. Do you feel really confident in your faith all the time? No. So it's a good thing that your faith doesn't save you. Jesus does. Tim Keller says it this way. He says, I could have incredible faith that strapping feathers to my arms, I could fly from the United States to the United Kingdom. But no matter how strong my faith is in the wrong object. He says, equally, I could barely have enough faith to board a transatlantic flight, trembling nervously as I do, yet the object of my faith will accomplish what it promises. Anybody here not real keen on flying? Do you not really like getting on airplanes? Maybe some of you refuse to do it now. Others of you, you are scared out of your mind to get on the plane, but here's something I know. If you have ever gotten on an airplane, it took you to the place that you intended to go, you got there. No matter how fearful you were, the object of your faith accomplished what it promised. And Keller goes on to say this, it is not faith that saves. It is not even faith in God that saves. It is faith in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ that saves us. Which leads us to the second thing I hope we can see on this Resurrection Sunday, that we would receive God's righteousness with incredible joy, that it would overwhelm our hearts and change everything about us so that we will move to realizing Jesus' worth. That at the end of the day, this is all about Jesus Christ. You know, it is so amazing what all of this means for us, that you can have a relationship with the God who created you and live your life in him. God clearly wants you to know that. He wants you to know that truth. He wants you to know the story of Jesus Christ. He wants you, I believe, to receive it. Not only did he send Jesus down to this earth to make all of that possible for us, but you know what else he made sure of? He made sure that this story was recorded for us, that it was explained to us, that his followers would continue from the time of his death and resurrection down to this day, so that on March the 30th, 2024, in the northwest suburbs of Des Moines, at what time is it? 9:59 a.m. on this morning, you would know that you could receive the righteousness of God simply through faith in Jesus Christ. That is unbelievable. But I've got to make sure that when I receive all of this into my life, it doesn't simply end with me and a focus on me. Just like I can't make it about my faith. So we want to receive it, we want to enjoy it, we want to live in it, and then let all of that gratitude lead you to worship Jesus. He's the hero. He is the Savior. This is all about him. And when I can come to the place where I realize, hey, this isn't really just about me. This is about the greatest being in the universe who came down and sacrificed himself for me. He's the hero. When I lift my eyes up to him, it actually opens my eyes to the reality of the world, and it changes my entire life. Let me just show you a few reasons from this passage alone. This is like one paragraph in the Bible why Jesus is so worthy. There's three key words that Paul uses here, these bigger theological terms to describe what's happening through what Jesus did for us. The first word he uses is the word redemption. That's in verse 24, through the redemption that comes by Jesus Christ. This means that Jesus bought us out of slavery. In other words, Paul has told us that we're all under the power of sin. And the picture the Bible gives us is that we're controlled by sin. Sin is our master. Those things inside of you that tell you to do stuff you shouldn't do. You not doing the things that you know you should do and being convicted and challenged about that. We know we're not all that we should be. It's the power of sin in our lives. Through Jesus Christ coming and dying on the cross, he paid the price through his blood to purchase us out of slavery to sin and give us a new master who is God the Father. He redeemed us. Jesus purchased you at the cost of his life on the cross. The second word Paul uses here in verse 25 is a sacrifice of atonement. Jesus is our atonement. Properly, this word really in the original language is propitiation. It's a word that means the wrath or the judgment of God was satisfied through the death and the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Remember the whole wrath thing? God's righteous. We are unrighteous. God is going to judge all unrighteousness. That judgment has to take place in order for God to be just, right? Verse 26, God is just. He's not just going to look the other way. That has to be paid for. God's judgment is going to come upon unrighteousness. And so Jesus Christ comes down as a sacrifice of atonement for us. And on the cross, Jesus takes the wrath, the judgment of God that you deserved upon himself. He absorbs it for you. and you get in exchange his righteousness. That's the third word, justification. All throughout this passage, that God would be just and the one who justifies those who have faith in Jesus Christ. This means Jesus makes us right with God because he took our place. He took the wrath of God upon himself, and he gives us his righteous life. Now, there's a whole lot more story to those concepts. There's a lot more we could go into in great detail. We could talk about this picture of like ancient slave markets and how Paul's picking up on that. We could talk about the Jewish sacrificial system where animals are slaughtered every single day to cover over for a short period the sins of the people, to make atonement for them, but it was never enough until Jesus came. We could talk about justification, which is a legal word, and it conjures up this idea of a courtroom, and you're being prosecuted because of your sins with absolutely no defense, and Jesus takes your place on that stand, and he takes the penalty that we deserved, and he gives us his righteousness. There's so much more to that. And maybe you know some of that. Maybe you could explain some of that to other people. Maybe you just learned and you just heard these words today, and you're like, okay, I didn't hear about that before. Maybe. But here's what I want you to realize. There are a million things God is doing all the time that are beyond our ability to comprehend. There are blessings upon blessings that we don't realize. Truths beyond what we get to see. What Jesus accomplished through his death and his resurrection, it was redemption. It was atonement. It was justification. It was forgiveness. It was reconciliation. It was adoption into a family. We didn't even talk about those last few. But here's the thing. Even though we can never grasp all of that, we get to enjoy the benefit of it all. Look, if you trusted in Jesus Christ, and you believed in him, and you never even heard these words, or you don't know that much about it, here's the crazy thing. You've been receiving the benefit of all of these things, even though you have no idea what they mean, and you didn't fully understand them. God is that gracious to give all of that to us through Jesus Christ, regardless of our understanding of it. We're like babies. Did you know that? I love you, but like you're a baby, you know? Turn to your neighbor and say, you're a bit, no, don't say that. But we're all like babies. Here's what I mean. Okay, let me show you a picture. Here's a number of babies recently that have been born at NorthPoint. These are NorthPoint families, NorthPoint babies that are up there. Aren't they cute? Go ahead, you can do the aw thing, you know, that's what you do when you put this. So cute. Now, we've had a lot of babies that are born. There's only one female that is up here, so I don't know what's going on, but you guys got to get busy. We need some more ladies around here, but 5 boys that are up there, all super cute. Let me ask you, what do babies know? Nothing, yeah. Not a lot, it's true, right? I need to be fed, change my diaper, let me sleep, give me some affection, give me some love, right? But they can't even verbalize those things. All they can do is make some sounds to try to help tell you what's going on, and we got to try to figure it out. They don't know very much. But even though they don't know much, they get to enjoy a warm house, food that is prepared for them. They get taken places, they get hugs, they get affection, they get changed, they get kept safe. They have no idea what a bill is, and they have no way to pay it. They can't prepare their own food. They can't pay taxes. They can't take care of insurance, right? They can't figure out their own education. They're cute, but they mainly suck the life out of us is what they do, right? Glad they don't understand what I'm saying right now, but that's actually true. That's what babies do. They receive all of these things, and they have no clue. They have no clue what goes into all of that. We are babies before God. And there is God, our gracious Father, loving us and serving us and taking care of us and justifying us and sacrificing his life for us and redeeming us and putting us in a family and taking the judgment that we should have received and answering our prayers. Jesus is praying for you right now in this moment and moving circumstances and preparing heaven for us. I'm just thinking about brunch right now, and Jesus is holding the world together. All of that. This is what makes him so amazing and worthy of all of your life. So enjoy the blessings. Learn more about them, embrace them, but don't let it stop there. Let it lead you to worship and to fall down before him. Let him capture your imagination and your heart and your passions. Let Jesus have all of you. He is worth it. And he is worthy. This Easter, receive the righteousness of Jesus Christ by faith in him. And let it move you to worship him with all that you are. You do know we worship something, right? You do know you will worship something with your life. Something in your life will have your main focus, your attention. It will be the thing you look to for happiness, for peace, for strength in your life. Why would you want it to be anything other than the greatest thing? Every other thing will disappoint you in the end. Every other thing will come up short. Nothing else can handle the expectations you put on it, but there is one who can. The God who created you sent his son for you so that you could have the righteous life of God and live in his life. Receive his righteousness by faith. Realize his incomparable worth. Would you bow your heads with me?